Hello, welcome to the Sports Philanthropy Podcast. I am your host, Roy Kessel, and today we are very excited to have with us Michael Wyman. Michael is the president of North Channel Community Rowing, and he's going to tell us about some of the amazing programs that they've been doing. So, Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Roy.
We're excited to share a little bit with our listeners about the work that you do at NCCR.
Well, great. I'm excited to be here as well and look forward to chatting about our program. North Channel Community Rowing, or NCCR as we call it for short, is a 2-year-old organization now and was founded by myself and three of my fellow friends and coaches. And we started the program in order to tackle the lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the sport of rowing. That has been an ongoing issue for US Rowing, our national organization, for many years. But after the George Floyd killing and Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, we decided that we needed to do something about that. And we started our program in Evanston, Illinois, and are currently serving 6th through 8th graders and teaching them about the sport of rowing and more, which we'll get to during the course of this podcast.
Well, it's great to see people taking that up and having that recognition of where there's a lack of opportunity. And so I commend you and your group for doing that. And we're going to spend more time going through the program and what exists there. But I want to go back to Michael as a child and talk about sports and where you developed that love and passion for sports in general, and then take us through how you got to rowing, because that's not usually a place people start.
No, you're exactly right. So I grew up outside of New York City and happened to go to a prep school in North Andover, Massachusetts, where rowing was a big sport. So I started rowing in 10th grade at the Brooks School in North Andover, and then went on to row in college at the University of New Hampshire. Graduated from there in 1981, so I'm an older guy, and just did some recreational rowing during graduate school in Hanover, New Hampshire. But really, since then, I have not done a whole lot of rowing myself. I was also a hockey player when I was a kid, but my true passion became rowing in 10th grade, and it was a sport that I was well suited for. I'm 6'4", where height matters in the sport, and I truly enjoyed it, and I did fairly well with the teams that I participated on. But to fast forward to where how I got involved and re-engaged in the sport of rowing, it was in 2010, and at the time I was living in Winnetka, Illinois, and there was a need to add to the staff at New Trier High School, and I happily joined and have been coaching there for now basically 13 years, coaching freshman boys for the school. And it has been so enjoyable and rewarding working with the kids there. But back to the formation of NCCR, there's an unfortunate lack of diversity at New Trier High School, and so the diversity that we saw on our team was not, we couldn't really do anything about that. But where we row, both at New Trier and NCCR, is here in Evanston, Illinois, where I'm living now. So we decided that there was a population of underrepresented and underserved kids here in Evanston that we could help and introduce to the sport. I also have been coaching Masters women for the last year or so. So I like to say I have kind of 3 rowing gigs right now: New Trier High School, North Channel Community Rowing, and North Suburban Crew. So my passion over the last 12, 13 years has kind of been reignited with the sport.
Well, it's great to see that you're taking the leadership role there. Obviously, New Trier as a whole, as a school, has a wealth of resources above most schools anywhere in the country, and even here on the North Shore of Chicago, it's one of the top schools. Um, so as you look at that landscape from New Trier, um, talk a little bit about the thought process that went into launching NCCR, and it's always a big jump, right? People have a lot of passion to do good, and very frequently I hear people expressing their ideals of, oh, this is what I'd love to do, right? And I always encourage them to go ahead and do it, and you actually did. So talk a little
Yes,
bit about that startup
sure.
process.
Yeah, we were pretty moved again by Black Lives Matter and so forth. And one of the four of us founders is one of the few Black coaches in America, not just in the Chicago area where he may be the only one. His name is Charles Richardson. So we had his perspective, and we had U.S. Rowing's perspective, and saw programs similar to ours, and some fashion, popping up around the country. But again, we really wanted to play a role in that, and started engaging with U.S. Rowing, who was starting to have monthly DEI Zoom meetings and talking about other programs around the country. And we said, you know what, we can do this, because where our school is in Winnetka, but where we row is in Evanston, and on that 20-minute drive, takes you to an entirely different community. Evanston happens to be, 1/3 white, 1/3 Black, 1/3 Latinx, roughly, including other races as well. So we said, the opportunity is absolutely ripe. And we always talk about the fact that there have only ever been 5 Black Olympians on the U.S. rowing team in the history of the sport, and that dates back to the late 1800s. And that's kind of a travesty, and that's something that's being addressed, and it trickles down to the lack of color at universities and high schools and youth programs. And so we said, you know what, this should something that we can hopefully easily remedy. We were a little worried about whether we'd be able to get off the ground, and whether people would show up when we first got the word out through the local school district in the summer or spring of 2021. But that was just the opposite. There is tremendous interest, and we were fortunate enough to get off to a good start.
It's always interesting to me when you look at people that start that organization. That's a common fear. Like, I'm passionate about this, but is there enough support in the community for it? And I think what you see is, so frequently the demand is much, much greater than we even imagine, right? We know that there's some interest and some demand for it. So talk a bit about how you did get the word out, and what the early stages of putting the organization together looked like.
Yeah, that's a great question, and again was one of our biggest concerns. And I can't emphasize enough that if someone's thinking about starting an organization similar to ours, how long it's going to take and how much work you have to put into it. But we started by really ingraining ourselves into the community through organizations similar to ours. We got to know the school district very well, District 65 in Evanston, which is the district for the middle schools, because we're 6th through 8th grade. And then we got to know folks at the YMCA and other organizations like Metro Squash and YOU, and we just started to develop in Evanston's Parks and Rec department. And through the school, they have a program where we could basically post a flyer, for after school activities and so forth. And we became a partner of theirs. And that got the word out. In the summer of 21, we had 36 kids participate in our 2 one-week camps. And then we were kind of off and running, because that was about the number of kids that we wanted to participate. Again, boys and girls. Our first year was 50% white, a quarter Black, and a quarter Latinx, which was a good start. And then, but this past year, in 2022, this summer, where it was, maybe just 22% white and almost 30%, Black and biracial, and 27% Latinx, and then kind of the mix between Asian and multiracial. So we achieved an incredible increase in diversity. And to go off on a quick tangent, we also gave priority to those that qualified for a free or reduced lunch at school, because that basically tells you that they are of need. So that was in something that we focused on early on, and was something that was important in our selection criteria this past year.
Well, I want to go back to those numbers for a minute, because I think that those are really important. You went in the first year, right? From 50, 25, 25, and go through the numbers again for 2022, because I think it's really to highlight, right? Going from 50% white to 22% white in 1 year, and then you added really that Asian and multi racial component. So go through those numbers one more time on 2022.
Sure. Yeah, I haven't memorized them, but it was again low 20s for white, around 30 for Black or biracial, and then high 20s for Latinx, and then the balance. And this past year, we in 2022 we had 45 kids in our program. We're limited with space on the water and at our boathouse, so we could only take that many, those many kids. So we had 65 kids sign up for 45 slots, and we were selective in who we chose, based upon the socioeconomic need, and then based upon our race, and then obviously sex, and then of course by grade, because we wanted an even mix of 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And we haven't discussed this yet, but our programs are entirely free. No participant pays for anything that we offer, whether it be classes, whether it be the free swimming lessons we offer for those that aren't swimming competent, and we provide swag and snacks, and even free transportation as needed. So as such, we felt like that we could pick and choose who we wanted to be able to attend. And when we went back to some of the families, to be blunt, some of the white kids, when we said, hey, we're aiming for diversity in our program, most of those families, if not all of them, always said, you know what, I get it. I understand what you're trying to do. Good for you. My kid can go do something else. So we're pretty proud of that. I think, of being able to achieve that diversity, because that's what it's all about, is introducing the sport to those that might not have had the opportunity before.
This is Roy Kessel, hosting Sports Philanthropy Podcast, sitting here with Michael Wyman, who's the president of North Channel Community Rowing, and we're talking about the growth of the program in the first 2 years. And if you have an opportunity, would love to have you take a look at their website at NCCRowing.org, and you can feel free to reach out to Michael at michael.wyman@nccrowing.org. Michael, that was really interesting when you talk about the reaction from the white parents who recognized that, in a sense, they're taking opportunities away from kids who may not otherwise get them, right? They may have other outlets where their kids could get an opportunity to row, or get an opportunity to participate in other sports. And so you're now past, what many would say is the hardest phase, right? Those first couple of years of getting off the ground, getting the program launched, because when you've got a track record and you've got some results, it's a lot easier for people to see what you're doing and buy into it. Because one of the best fundraising trainers that I ever had, his comment was, what the eyes don't see, the heart won't feel. And so when you have the ability to show and let people see what you're actually doing, that's a whole lot better than a business plan on a piece of paper where you're talking about what you want to do.
That's a Very good point, because everyone said in our first year, or literally our first day, you have to make it a welcoming environment for your participants, and we made a point of having diversity on our staff, diversity amongst our counselors, and make it welcoming, and where the kids that we had in the summer of 21 would want to come back, and we worried about that, quite frankly, quite a bit, but it turned out to be just fine. And our approach and communication with the kids and their parents, and some of the surveys that we did, which I'd like to talk about, and some of our outreach and getting buy-in and acceptance from the community that I talked about earlier, was super, super important to us. And this past year we had gosh, I would say at least 2/3 of the kids from 21 came back this year, that were still in that had moved up to 7th and 8th grade. And then we, of course, got a whole bunch of new kids, given our higher level numbers. But one of the important things I wanted to talk about is not just that we are focusing on, introducing the sport of rowing, but we are also working hard to develop what is kind of broadly called the wraparound services, and that is getting involved with tutoring and mentoring and wellness and enrichment. And that's our kind of big initiative for this year. We quite honestly tried to make it one last year, but with COVID and just kind of structural issues, it was hard to get off the ground. But we are starting tutoring with our kids as of next week, where we're going to be working out one day at the Y for 45 minutes, and then we're going to be having tutoring and mentoring for 45 minutes, and then we will continue to row on the water as well. And this is super, super important in what they call sports-based youth development, which is kind of a new term, I believe. Programs around the country where you don't want to just focus on the sport. You want to focus on the well-being of your participants, and we aim to get involved with the school and with the parents. With their schools and the parents, to make sure that the impact that the little impact that we're having on these kids' lives help them become better people. And they are better. I shouldn't put it necessarily that way, but that they can take what the sport of rowing teaches you, and through the discipline and the teamwork, and forward with their lives.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that was really interesting to me that you mentioned earlier is including swimming lessons, right? So when you look at the ability of somebody to enjoy rowing, right, the fear that must be there if you don't know how to swim, or you're not a strong enough swimmer to be out in that environment, would really prevent you from participating. And so giving kids that opportunity to develop that skill in and of itself is its own program, right, of teaching the swimming, and then now laying on top these other wraparound services, as you called them. We always talk about how do you develop better people through sports, and that SBYD concept you talk about of making better people, right? Sports is just the tool that we use
Correct.
to mold people in help improve them for all aspects of their life, right? And we know the data show that very strongly. So where are you getting your mentors from for this type of program?
Well, that's kind of to be determined, but it's going to be ourselves. We've just expanded our board from 4 to 8 people. We now have our board itself is very diverse now. It's half male, half female, and half white and half people of color, which we're excited about. So we're going to be developing that. But the mentors are going to be, some of the teachers that we engage with, basically some of the tutors and so forth. So that's all kind of part of our plan, and quite frankly, what we're seeking additional funding for is, to build out those capabilities going forward.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting you talk about expanding the board and talking about diversity, and it's such an important discussion point because when you talk about representing diverse populations and communities, we often see boards and organizations that are almost entirely white trying to go in and do that work. And it's hard to gain the trust and confidence of a community if you don't have others involved. So I give you credit for doing that right from the early stages. It's a much better starting point. So you've been at this for 2 years now. You're getting to launch the tutoring, mentoring, and wellness types of programs for the kids. Take us through what you see here on the horizon in the next 24 months.
Well, one thing has been accomplished that was kind of on the horizon, so to speak, from day one. And everyone said, number one, start with middle schoolers and not high schoolers because it's easier to engage them. But the question we were asked is, what's going to happen once your kids, kind of age out or graduate from your program? And when they become ninth graders, how are they going to be able to row competitively in high school and possibly college, and get scholarships or easier access in the college with the sport? And that was a tricky question because at the time in 2021, there was no rowing opportunities for high school kids in Evanston. But lo and behold, Evanston Township High School started a rowing club program earlier, about a month ago or less, and now it's off to a great start. We played a small but important part in helping bring together the athletic director at the high school, Chris Tino, and a woman that we found, or knew of, I should say, from Northwestern University, who had just graduated and had been president of the rowing club there. And her name is Luciana Ruiz, has taken the ball and run with it. And we have, it's 7, I believe, of our kids from last year, and now that are rowing at ETHS. And that is not just great local news, but Illinois news, but that is great national news for a school the size of Evanston Township High School to start a rowing club. That is a big deal, and we're very, very excited about that and helping that be successful. But coming back to NCCR, we want to, what our challenges are creating a competitive, kind of racing team, because a lot of the support from US Rowing and other foundations look for, okay, how are we going to get, more, kids of color, or, men and women, on the US national team or at the, at the high level collegiate rowing. It's nice to have a little club, where you're teaching the kids to, quote, paddle around on the water, but are they going to be, moving on to racing? So that is a focus of ours, where we need to be on the water more, and that we need to spend, start to create some local scrimmages with other programs here in the city with kids of our same age and talent and experience, and then hopefully attend some regattas in the future, whether it be here in Chicago or around the greater Midwest.
Well, it's an ambitious agenda, and you've done a lot in a very short period of time so far. We're excited to follow the work that you're doing. Tell our audience what they can do. Obviously, we know people can contribute funds. That's the easy ask in terms of what people can do. But give our audience a sense of other ways that they might be able to help NCCR.
No, that's a great question and a kind offer that you're asking, Roy. We would, anyone out there that has any, previous rowing experience at any age, we would welcome their involvement. We're always looking for, kind of counselors and coaches. And I'll jokingly say, particularly if you know how to drive a motorboat or a launch, as we call them, because we have our fall program going on. now, 3 days a week, through the end of October. And we'll be indoor training in the winter, rowing again in the spring, and then having our what we call our summer camps next year. If any of those out there in your audience are interested in being kind of mentors or teachers or consultants in that regard, we would certainly welcome that, because we've always joked that we're good, or decent, I should say, rowing coaches, but we don't know much else. And I always try to be somewhat self-deprecating in that regard, because we didn't know anything about creating a 501c3 and bylaws and how to reach out to the community when we didn't live here. I do now, which is a great thing here in Evanston. So we accept any and all advice, and happy to have coffee or a phone call with anyone that is interested in what we're doing.
Well, you clearly know a lot, and you've learned a lot, because you've done an amazing job getting this off the ground. I hope, just to clarify for our viewers and listeners, does everybody need to be local to the Chicago sort of Evanston? Is this an in-person type of role that they need to serve, or are there opportunities to participate in a virtualized fashion?
Yeah, that's virtual would be fine, as it relates to the first part of my answer. Being a counselor or a mentor and so forth. Yes, we would like that person to be local, even to the north side of Chicago, and not just Evanston, but easy access to where we row, which is at Oakton and McCormick in southwest Evanston, I guess that is. But it's in terms of virtual support and help, happy to talk to anyone around the country, anyone that has a passion for, again, sports-based youth development.
Well, Michael, I commend you on what you've been able to accomplish, and I appreciate you taking time to share your story and the great work that you're doing. Before we let you go, I want to have a little bit of fun here and put you on the spot for a minute. So
Okay.
we're going to use our sports philanthropy superpowers, and we're going to grant you the wish of being able to be a commissioner of any sport. So tell us what sport you would pick.
Easy. Hockey. NHL. Yeah.
Okay, so you've gone ahead and kicked Gary Bettman out of his office in New York, and you'll be.
I wouldn't. He does a good job, but if he's looking for a successor, I'd be happy to jump in, because I played as a little kid, not that well, but I love the sport and I still follow it very closely.
So as commissioner, then you must cherish the role of getting booed when you go out to award the Stanley Cup to the winning team. But other than that, when you look at hockey, what's one change you would like to see in the sport?
I can think of two, if I may.
Go ahead.
Number one, I'd like to get rid of the fighting. I know it's kind of part of the sport, and they've done a good job in that regard over the years, but I really think it's all got to go. And my second I'll throw in is I changed the overtime play from 3-on-3 to 4-on-4. That's a subtlety, but I think to me 4-on-4 hockey is almost the best. But that's another thing I'd push for. 3-on-3 is just it's kind of a lot of luck, I think.
Well, it's a different element, right? When you go 3-on-3, you go back to where the Hawks were doing well in the playoffs and winning Stanley Cups, right? You put Kane and Taves on the ice, and put somebody like Hossa or Duncan Keith or someone out there for a 3-person team. It's pretty hard for anybody to compete with that. I think one of the things with the 4 or 5 on the ice, it makes it hard for one guy to really just have that pure skating dominance.
Exactly. Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's exciting, that's for sure, but it goes quickly. I guess it accomplishes, getting the guys off the ice and home in bed after. But anyway, that's
Although the one change I would like to see in hockey that I think is a problem with the way that the standings end up at the end of the year, is that they need
Hmm.
to go to the soccer model of awarding 3 points for a win, or at least for a regulation win.
Yeah.
It needs to be 3 points, because you get almost no separation between the teams when there's so many ties, and then, a shootout win.
Right. Right. That's a
Everybody's
very good point. Yeah.
everybody's getting all of these points. But if you go ahead and just win, 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 you're not moving very far ahead, right? A team that wins in a shootout is getting the same points as a team that wins 5-0 in regulation.
Right.
And so I think that you would see, in my view, a much better and realistic sort of set
Yeah.
of standings if you did it
Yeah.
that way.
That's very fair. Good point.
So again, Michael, thank you so much for joining us. For all of our viewers and
Well, my
listeners,
pleasure. And thanks for everyone for listening.
we appreciate you taking time to join the Sports Philanthropy Podcast today. This is your host, Roy Kessel, signing off. Please remember to live generously. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Roy.